In the adult Sunday school class, we have been studying the book of Matthew chapter 24. And the book of Matthew chapter 24 deals with the prophecies about the end of the world, the end of the ages. And his disciples, of course, were asking him questions saying, well, when is this going to happen? I mean, who else to ask who's going to know what's going to happen in the future but the one who wrote the future, Jesus Christ. Now we are moving on to verse 16, and it's talking about the events that happen after the Great Tribulation. Once the Great Tribulation starts, it says, "And then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. And pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day." These are warnings specifically addressed to Israelites. Judea, housetops, and Sabbath all speak to a Jewish environment. France would write, a refugee's lot is hard enough without extra impediments. If you think about it, how many times have you seen in the news when people have died trying to go back and rescue things? Like maybe their house is on fire and they go back to rescue something that maybe is dear to them, a family heirloom or whatnot. Then they get caught in the blaze or in a tornado where they should have left the area, but they stayed. In Hurricane Katrina, after Hurricane Katrina, I talked to one of the people that left, and he said that lots of people he knew passed away because they utterly refused to leave because they wanted to protect all their belongings. Well, after 30 feet of water, it doesn't matter at that point. It's all ruined anyway. But, they're saying that this horrific event that's about to happen, you just get out. Get out. Whatever it takes, get out. Don't hesitate. Leave. In light of the broader context in this chapter, these words of Jesus should be understood as having primary application to those who see the abomination of desolation in the very last days during the Great Tribulation, events that are yet to occur. Yet there is no doubt in some ways the catastrophe that came upon Judea, and especially Jerusalem in AD 70, was a prefiguring of that future event, an imperfect foreshadow of an ultimate fulfillment. For these things, for this reason, virtually all the Christians fled Jerusalem and Judea in the years leading up to AD 70, when the Roman armies arrived in the area intent on putting down the Jewish rebellion in the Roman province of Palestine. There is a reasonably good tradition that Christians abandoned the city, perhaps in AD 68, about halfway through the siege. Eusebius and Epiphanius say that at this juncture, after Cestius Gallus had raised the siege and Vespasian was approaching with an army, all who believed in Christ left Jerusalem and fled to Pella and other places beyond the river Jordan. And so they all marvelously escaped the general shipwreck of their country. Not one of them perished. Sadly, that was not what the Jewish people did. Jesus' advice was that when that day came, men ought to flee to the mountains. They did not. They crammed themselves into the city and into the walls of Jerusalem from all over the country, and that very folly multiplied the grim horror of the famine of the siege 100-fold. Then let those who are in Judea flee. This is because at the appearance of the abomination of desolation, the desolation will first be poured out at Judea. And because the church will not be a factor at this time, having already been caught up to meet Jesus in the air, in 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 through 17, what it's encouraging is saying that this is really still Jesus still speaking to the Jews in the area at the time, that even though he knew bad things are happening, he still cared about his people. Even though they rejected him, he still cared. And he's saying, in the last days, you're in this area, you've got to flee. He said, the church is no longer going to be here. We're going to be gone after the rapture. Right before the Great Tribulation, all Christians will be ushered up. Because Jesus told his disciples about the abomination of desolation, which is set up by the Antichrist in the middle of the Great Tribulation, and warned them of this coming destruction in the Great Tribulation, some Christians believe that all Christians will go through the Great Tribulation. To them, it seems evident. Why would Jesus say these things to his disciples if his disciples would not experience them? The answer is simple. We know from the passage and other passages that God will remove his church before the fury of the Great Tribulation, catching them away to meet Jesus in the air, which is said in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 16 through 17. Yet this information is valuable for the followers of Jesus so they can understand his plan for the future. This information is especially valuable for those who will become his disciples in the Great Tribulation after the church is gone. We do well to remember that the disciples who heard Jesus say these words saw none of these things, yet it was still good for them to hear it. Even if Christians will not go through the Great Tribulation, it is good for them and those who will become Christians in tribulation to know what will happen during that time. Jesus spoke to all the ages here. Again, going back to what I had said last week, or no, actually it was Wednesday night. I had been sick all day, and so I got to so I was here for our prayer meeting, and guess who showed up? Surprisingly, Dee was there. I mean, of course, I hugged her, squeezed her as tight as I could, without breaking her. She's fragile, but it was sweet. But one of the things we were talking about is how people get so fooled by these false prophets. And I said, well, I've been studying the book of Peter at that time, and in the book of Peter, it says that there's nothing hid, that God says everything plainly. And here's Jesus, he's not hiding anything. He says, these are things that are going to happen. I'm not hiding anything from you because I'm your friend. I'm going to tell you honestly what's going to happen. And it's good. It's good. It's an encouragement for us. It also should be an encouragement to get us out there and give as many people the gospel as possible and get as many people saved so that they don't have to go through this event if it transpires in our timeline. It was an encouragement and a warning for Christians then and for Christians today and for those who become Christians during the Great Tribulation. Moving on to verse 21. For then should now be the great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor even shall be, except those days shall be shortened. There should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, and there believe it not. For there shall rise false Christs and false prophets, that show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there shall the eagles be gathered together. The Great Tribulation, when Jesus is speaking about the Great Tribulation, he said that this will be the most awful time in all of history. When we think of terrible wars, plagues, famines, and genocide history has seen, this is a sobering statement. When God pours out his wrath on a God-rejecting world, it will be truly a great tribulation. Those who believe that the events of Matthew 24 were all or mostly all fulfilled in AD 70 are in the uninviolable position of arguing that the calamity that befell Jerusalem at that time was the worst catastrophe in all of history. That is not possible to adequately defend historically. As bad as the catastrophe of AD 70 was, there have been subsequent wars and calamities even worse. This reminds us that this great tribulation, that this time of catastrophe, such as not have been since the beginning of the world unto this time, has not yet been fulfilled. No one should be deceived about the nature of Jesus' coming. It will not be a secret or private. It will not be secret or private, but as plain as lightning that flashes across the sky. But in the midst of such tribulation, there will be a temptation to look for false messiahs. As the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Christ's coming will be sudden, startling, universally visible, and terrifying to the ungodly. The coming Son of Man, parousia, coming, is used only in this chapter in the Gospels, verses chapter 3, 27, 37, 39. Though in the epistles it is used several times of Jesus' return in glory, its literal meaning is presence. But it was used for official visits by high-ranking persons, state visits, and also for divine visitations. It's its technical use for Jesus' ultimate visitation. Now, speaking about where the carcass is, the eagles shall be gathered together, this is a difficult statement. It was probably a figure of speech with the idea, when judgment is right, it will surely come. That at the right time, Jesus always comes at the right time. Moving on to verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall give not her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of a fig tree. When its branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. Several prophetic passages describe the cosmic disturbances that will precede and surround the glorious return of Jesus. It is difficult to say exactly what the sign is. It seems to precede his return as described in Revelation chapter 19, verse 11. Perhaps this sign is somewhat related to the incredible cosmic disturbances that will precede the great event. Some, in light of the Roman Emperor Constantine's vision, thought the sign of the Son of Man would be a cross in the sky. More probably, it is simply a way to describe the physical, visible return of Jesus to the earth from heaven. Others point out that the semeion is the LXX translation for the standard or banner, referred to the Old Testament as a signal of the gathering of God's people. Barclay on semeion, it is the regular word for the arrival of a governor into his province or the coming of a king to his subjects. It rarely describes a coming in authority and power. This is the fulfillment of the end, indicated by the sign of the abomination of desolation. Since this has not happened yet, neither has the abomination of the desolation. And again, those who claim that all or most of the events of Matthew chapter 24 were fulfilled in the Roman conquest of Jerusalem and Judea in AD 70 are in an unenviable position. Unenviable. See, I can't pronounce words. Unenviable position. They often claim that Jesus fulfilled this coming on the clouds of heaven of the Son of Man with power and great glory by coming in judgment against the Jewish people in AD 70. Even some of those who believe that most of the events of Matthew 24 were fulfilled in the fall of Jerusalem understand that this is stretching too far. From the foregoing exposition, it appears that the coming of the Son of Man is not to be identified with the judgment of Jerusalem. In other words, the things is that there have been awful times in history. And I know during World War II, with all the horrors that the Nazis did, lots of people thought that it was it. Jesus was coming back. But, think about it. Something even more awful than the Nazis is coming. That's hard to believe. Something even more evil. But when you have a person who sets themselves up as God and has absolute rule, then, and people believe that person, unspeakable evil is what could happen. So, but thank the Lord that we who are born again will not see that.